I would begin his story by talking about the fact that he was born in 1921 at Nisconnet, which is just outside of Kamloops, a Shuswap tribe. Was raised mainly by his maternal grandparents who taught him the Shuswap language and looked after him until he had to be admitted to the residential school in Kamloops, which took place when he was 9. Within 4 years after being there, he ended up being admitted to the Koklitsa sanatorium in Chilliwack, which dealt with people suffering from tuberculosis. And he ended up spending close to 4 years at that hospital. And ended up, I think, doing a lot of thinking about who he is and what he is.
He was a Secwepemc person who, through a lot of adversity, working as a tradesman in the lumbering industry, rose to become a world leader through his advocacy in British Columbia and then across Canada and across the world.
George Manuel was a First Nations political leader who promoted community development on reserves across British Columbia and pressed for reforms in federal and provincial policies affecting First Nations people.
Union of BC Indian Chiefs fully supports the actions of the Splimchin Band and the people here today who are concerned about their children.
He was a community development officer at one point, and then he was an advisor to the government. They set up a government advisory panel. And that was important because it was the first time government had ever consulted Indigenous people. But they didn't listen, of course. They did exactly opposite.
In 1969, the federal government released the Statement of the Government of Canada on Indian Policy, also known as the White Paper. It included a proposal to repeal the Indian Act and eliminate Indian legal status. Manuel voiced strident opposition to the White Paper and urged its reversal.
And it was that put George into the leadership. He was elected then to start a national organization, the National Indian Brotherhood, which is the forerunner of the Assembly of First Nations today. And he went to Ottawa just with a briefcase and a mandate, and no money, no nothing. And he built that organization, the National Indian Brotherhood, to a major lobbying organization.
They publicly rescinded the 1969 White Paper in 1971, and throughout the 70s, George continued to press, as president of the National Indian Brotherhood, to press the Trudeau government to recognize Aboriginal and treaty rights.
I guess in the concrete terms, George Manuel's most significant achievement was around what was called the Constitutional Express.
Nearly 1 year ago, the Constitution Express rolled across Canada. Hundreds of Native men, women, and children traveled to Ottawa demanding their rights to reserve lands and to hunting, fishing, and trapping be preserved. The Constitution promises only Native rights and freedoms as they presently exist. The Indians fear their many Aboriginal land and treaty claims could be wiped out.
So that train arrived here in Ottawa while they were negotiating the Constitution, and there were hundreds of people on that train, and they spread out all over Ottawa, and the mayor of Ottawa encouraged everybody to, put everybody up, and they did. They opened their houses to the people from the Constitution Express, and they organized daily demonstrations at the Governor General's house, here at Parliament, around the city of Ottawa. The Prime Minister, of course, agreed to meet with the leaders, and they put that clause back in the Constitution. The train was a big focal point and brought a lot of pressure to bear on Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and Jean Chrétien, who was the Minister of Justice, to put Section 35 back in the Constitution.
But he was really recognized outside of Canada, perhaps even more in many circles than he was in Canada, as a great international leader.
If we receive the same kind of cold shoulder, we've been ignored, then we will seek means to have our case heard at the United Nations, and we're not recognized in the United Nations as a nation of people, but we have developed some pretty good public relations, and we will lobby a number of nations to take our case to the United Nations.
In the 1970s, Manuel visited many countries, including Tanzania and New Zealand, where he met other Indigenous peoples and learned of their experiences and history of colonialism. Manuel believed that Indigenous peoples around the world could achieve their goals if they united. He founded and became the first president of the World Council of Indigenous Peoples, helping to develop its Universal Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 1977.
And after that, he launched what he called the People's Movement. After he left the national organization, a BC activist, really radical, sort of Isle No More on steroids organization. And that was for his later years of life. He worked on that.
When you find 90% of our Indian people in Canada who are in welfare, people who are starving in a very rich country in Canada, to me is a form of subtle genocide.
George Manuel's legacy is that he taught generations of people to value themselves and our Aboriginal title and rights.
Expand the powers that you have so as we can control our fishing rights, so as we can control our hunting rights, so as we can control education, so as we can control our whole destiny.